Well, welcome back to the Flaming Goblin. It's been a good couple of months, probably about 3 months now, since our last broadcast. So I'm sorry about that. Things have kind of gone a little bit awry, but due to personal issues and Christmas and New Year always getting in the way of absolutely everything. What a wonderful time it is. Well, we've still been gaming. We've been playing through the Forest of Doom campaign still, and also the Curse of Strahd campaign, which is the Dungeons and Dragons campaign that we've been sort of converting to use the second edition Advanced Fight and Fantasy rules. I'm going to use this session just to bring you all up to date, really, with what's been happening with the Forest of Doom. It's all been completed nicely. It's all been finished off. Last time we saw our brave adventurers, Ash, Peregrine, and Enzio. It was, they'd just come from the southern part of the Darkwood Forest and broken out into the beautiful light of day into the grasslands and the valley of the area known as the Darkwood Forest, which sort of runs through the middle of the forest, with a river running through the middle of that. They were just heading off towards a rickety bridge, heading north. Randomly, like you do, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I had a wonderful little thought about a small event that I would put into the adventure to just chop things up a little bit from running from the book, and created a little Ratman community with a couple of Ratmen, one of which could speak common tongue and was able to speak to the adventurers. It was an interesting little place that we set up where the idea was that normal rats were scurrying around the floor of the cave, in and out of tiny little holes amongst the cave, and they travelled around the forest and came back and brought information back to their king rat who lived in this community. Roland the rat was the useful go-between, the translator, who helped the adventurers by giving them information to help them along with their quest of finding the second part of the hammer of Gillibrand, the Dwarven Hammer, which they're searching for in the Forest of Doom campaign. It was agreed by the king and the translator and the adventurers that if they gave, I believe it was 5 items, either gold pieces or 5 items from their pack, then they would get this information. And this was carried out nicely. They sorted this out, and that was all sorted. I think there was something cryptic, like they were told that it was in the southern western part of the northern part of the forest and protected not by the living but by the dead, or something along those lines. Anyway, this helped them out greatly, and they went on their way. They left the rats, said their fond farewells, and headed north over the stony bridge towards the northern part of the forest. Heading across the bridge, they had an issue with some wild boar, but as the bridge collapsed, they managed to escape and carry on their journey. They came across an egg house, which sounds strange in itself. It's a house that had eggs around all the walls. No occupants, but eggs around all the walls. Eggs of different types and sizes and colours and patterns from all birds probably from around Titan, let alone Lancia. And there was a small shelf above the fireplace with a little place for, I think it was 6 or 9 separate eggs, each with the different names on them, and the challenge was to find the different eggs. Now, all but 2 they managed to find in the building. One of the ones missing was a pterodactyl egg, and another one missing was an egg of a deathhawk, which hope at some point they will find in the future and return them to the cottage. It's still being daylight and fairly early on. They left the little house after exploring the eggs and the different information they could find out about the birds, and headed on down a track where they found a abandoned well. Mysterious well. Well. And Enzio both had a peek down the well, and it was decided that actually it wasn't something they were going to explore at the moment. The well was dry, and they could see at the bottom of it there was a path leading off. This wasn't what they were looking for, so the adventurers decided to abandon the abandoned well and carry on with their journey. They went back up the path a bit and headed north, where they found a big house with smoke rising from the chimney, and they approached the door, knocked on the door, and the house belonged to Aragon the Archmage. Now, after a short conversation with Aragon the Archmage, it became clear that he wasn't actually an archmage at all, but this was just something he said to scare people away and keep them at bay, because he wasn't a big fan of visitors. But the adventurers seemed fairly kind, and so he invited them in to stay, and that's where they stayed for the night. He also gave them a pterodactyl egg that he happened to have, knowing full well that they might well return it to the cottage, which they did the next morning. They also found a wild horse roaming free, and thankfully Peregrine, with her talk to animals trait as it were, was able to talk to the wild horse and stop it from attacking them. The horse was tamed, and Enzio climbed aboard and rode the horse. I can't remember off the top of my head what he actually called the horse. I'll have to check with Enzio next time I speak to him in the forest. Anyway, after this, they roamed the woodlands a little bit more and came to the edge of the northern part of the forest. Now, knowing that they had to head southwest, they did such and wandered down until they found the Flax Crypt. It's called the Flax Crypt because it's named after Duke Cornelius Flax and houses his remains. He was a fairly evil duke of the area and caused lots of trouble, and eventual town folk eventually killed him off. And this is where his bones were hidden. On exploration of the crypt, they found that his corpse was in a tomb. There was a dead goblin here, and this dead goblin was Sneeg, one of the goblins who'd been responsible for stealing the warhammer from Gillibrand. And this had then obviously passed into the hands of Cornelius Flax, who had become a Ghoul King, a nasty Ghoul King, quite a strong character for the adventurers to fight, but they did their damage and killed him off eventually. He rose up out of the coffin, or the tomb as it were. His head had been resting on what looked like a pillow or a cushion, but it turned out to be the head of the hammer, the head of Gillibrand's hammer, which they were looking for. Having found the handle with the other goblin, they connected them both together and knew then all they had to do was return it to Stonebridge village. After leaving the crypt, they then wandered on and found another crypt. The place seems to be haunted by the undead, this area of the forest. It seems full of them. This one was the crypt of the Witch King. The path is so overgrown in places that you have to cut your way through it. Your progress is long and tiring. Eventually the path terminates at a squat stone structure. Almost completely hidden beneath vines and creepers, the building does not appear to have any doors or windows, but one wall has been cleared of vegetation. There is a large pile of rubble in front of the bare wall. Well, the stone door swings open silently to reveal stone steps descending into the darkness. The steps lead down to a pool of dark, stagnant water that fills an underground chamber. An ornate stone coffin sits on a plinth above the water in the centre of the chamber. Well, this sounded quite nasty and dangerous, but thankfully it was unguarded. The Witch King was long gone, and two useful magic items were found down here, an elemental staff and a stone mask, which were picked up quickly and used by the adventurers. Once the chamber had been made safe, this was then used as lodgings for the night. And in fact, I think it was this one, or it might have been, I think actually they went back to the Crypt of Flax, which was obviously drier, didn't have a pond at the bottom of it. So they went back to the Crypt of Flax and spent the night in the tomb with the goblin skeleton, who thankfully didn't come back to life. And that was that for that session. The next session included an encounter with some Deathhawks and also a bunch of brigands or bandits on the northern part of the forest, just as they were making their way out of the forest towards Stonebridge. So both of these were dealt with, thankfully quite peacefully, with the bandits, and that was all dealt with nicely. And the bandits, in fact, offered them a Deathhawk egg, which was the last egg that they were looking for. They managed to trade some items to get that from them, and the Deathhawk attack was veered off, thankfully, by Peregrine's animal friend talent again, which comes in very useful. Just to briefly tell you a bit more about that, as it tends to come up quite a bit. Brave Peregrine uses it, and it's a useful little talent. Animal Friend. This talent marks the hero out as a friend to all the beasts. No natural animal will attack the hero unless magically controlled. Wild and domestic animals alike will either avoid the hero or investigate and then leave. If the hero obviously shields any companions, then most animals will leave the whole group alone. Animals that are starving or maddened through pain may well attack companions of the animal friend hero. If an animal friend hero ever attacks an animal that is not being magically controlled, the act of betrayal will mean that the animal is free to react along with other nearby animals. So yeah, it comes in quite handy and was used to great effect to ward off the Deathhawks. Heading north still, leaving the forest, they broke out to see the northern river known as the Red River. The river that runs through the middle of the Darkwood Forest is actually called the Catfish River, and this river that runs across the north is called the Red River. A bridge crossing this is what leads to the town of Stonebridge, or the Kingdom of Stonebridge, City Stonebridge, whatever, which is where King Gillibrand lives. It says, the path leads through a field to a stone bridge over a slow-moving river. Beyond the bridge are the small cottages and wooden huts of a village, and behind them is a stone wall encircling some larger buildings. A sign on the bridge reads Stonebridge. You cross the bridge and see two old dwarves with long white beards standing by a cottage looking at you. They eye you suspiciously, commenting on your wounds and your torn clothes. You got those in Darkwood Forest, I presume, says one of the dwarves, pointing his long clay pipe. Some people never learn. Adventurers are all the same. I can't see the sense in it myself. After conversing with the two dwarves for a little while, the dwarves agreed to help them and take them up to the castle. It says, you walk through the village behind the guards and are aware of many dwarvish folk watching you. They begin to follow you, and a procession builds up behind. There are lots of mutterings and whispers among the crowd of dwarves, and expectant looks show on their faces. Soon you arrive at the foot of the stone steps leading up to a large stone building. Outside the building, on an ornate wooden throne, sits an old dwarf with a long beard. He's wearing a crown, but looks miserable and holds his head in his hands. At the sight of the hammer, the old dwarf's eyes light up, and he jumps to his feet, taking it eagerly from you. He starts to shout, my hammer, we are saved. Now, my people, we are ready to fight the trolls. The whole crowd erupts into cheering, waving their axes and swords in the air. You have returned the missing warhammer to King Gillibrand and saved the dwarves of Stonebridge. Your quest is over. So a big well done to the adventurers that managed to complete this. It's a fantastic campaign. At the end of it, there's a list of achievements which gives experience points or bonus experience points and titles for different things that were accomplished throughout the campaign. Looking back, as I said to the players, looking back, there's quite a few bits that have been missed, which is interesting, and it's quite good because it means we can then go back and use different areas and different events that took place in the Forest of Doom campaign and utilise those in separate adventures. And we'll be running an adventure next week, which I'm designing at the moment, which will follow on from this and take them back into Darkwood Forest to hopefully explore a few more of the other things. Each of the different area, although you have these set fixed encounters such as the Flax Crypt, the Crypt of the Witch King and that kind of thing, each of those is a fixed encounter which sort of takes place a certain place in the forest, but there are different markers on the forest as well, so which are floating encounters or random encounters as well. There's random monsters encounters which you can use. Sure, you've all used them before in different adventures, rolling 3d6 and seeing what creature comes up. They faced the Deathhawks, which was a wandering monster, and they also faced a bunch of bandits, which comes up as a rolling wandering monster. It gives you the stats for using those, but also suggests using Out of the Pit, Return to the Pit, and Beyond the Pit, which are the monster manuals for Advanced Fighting Fantasy. But as well as the different wandering monsters, there's also things like the Fretting Friar, who's a chap that you might meet. There's events caused by bad weather. There's muddy pools, there's ambushes, spider lairs, lots of different types of events. There's even sort of small communities living, much like the Ratman community, but small communities living in the forest which you can bump into and explore. So there's so much more to this book than just the campaign that runs through it. All these different events in the south part, the north part, and in the bit through the middle as well. Each has its own separate group of fixed events and floating encounters as well as its own list of random monsters which are designed specifically for that area of the forest. So yeah, there's so much more that you can get from it. It's a fantastic book. It's available from Arian Games and through Drive-Through RPG. And yeah, highly recommend it. Right, well, that's it for the Forest of Doom campaign. Like I say, we'll be heading back there next week with the same characters, same adventurers, and hopefully I shall come back to you with more information from that. Also in store, we have updates from Tim, our other Dungeon Master, for the work he's doing on Curse of Strahd, because our characters had dinner with Strahd the other night, so hopefully it'll be interesting to hear a bit more about that and where we're headed with that. It's fantastic system with if you've ever played any of the Dungeons and Dragons adventures, they all sort of, you open up one bit and then it unlocks other areas and things, and it's a fantastic system to play and very good adventure. Also, we are still lining up to do more Tales from the Flaming Goblin, which are the interviews. You might have heard the one with Sydney Snivelspot interviewing Sleeky Longtail, our Ratman adventurer from our original stories, our original group. Ember and Fetchit and Whiskers are all lined up to have interviews done as well, as soon as we find the time. But that is it for now. I hope you've enjoyed listening. Please feel free to leave comments. Please like and download if you like it. That'd be fantastic. But please leave me comments. Feel free to message me on the Flaming Goblin on Instagram, and let me know any thoughts, any ideas you want me to throw at the adventures in the future. And yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much for listening. Bye for now.